All right, last week in Amsterdam, before and after a soccer match between Dutch and Israeli teams, Jewish and Israeli fans of the visiting club were ambushed and violently attacked in the streets in what many are calling a modern-day pogrom. Here's a clip.
Children, motherfucker! I'll give you my money. I'll give you this children. For the children. I'll give you my money. Free Palestine now! Free Palestine!
إسرائيل الزب السامر طبقون تعقلب السامر طبقون ميك ميك رايدي معاه رايدي مين معاه رايدي
Joining us now to speak about this is Ayaan Hirsi Ali, an activist, best-selling author, fellow at the Hoover Institute, and former Dutch member of Parliament. Ayaan has just launched a media platform called Courage Media, which aims to amplify the voices of those standing up to the anti-Western, anti-liberal, anti-democratic movements that are taking root in media, politics, and schools. Welcome, Ayaan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Peter.
So you are uniquely positioned to comment on this story. I was mentioning before we started that I met you many years ago when you had just come to Washington, D.C. from the Netherlands, which you were a citizen of the Netherlands, a member of Parliament, and you fled. There's some overlap with why you fled and what we're seeing, these images coming out of the Netherlands. Actually, we're seeing them, updated ones too. This has gone on for a couple more days. So give me a sense of, like, when you look at this, a couple, 15 years out from when you left, what do you see?
So what I see is what you all see, which is what's happening on the streets right now. And then you see all the commentary. Oh, look, there's a pogrom. Or maybe it's not a pogrom. It's just football hooligans being football hooligans. The commentary on the ground today, which in a week or so we will all forget about. There's that. So let's just call that the superficial level. But then on a much deeper level, I see three things which are just not going to go away, and they're incompatible. So please bear with me, let me explain them. The first is this whole idea of multiculturalism, which I think is in America what we call wokeism, or we've got loads of other names for them. But in Europe, back in the day, we used to call it multiculturalism. It came across the Atlantic from places like Canada, the United States, and other places. And here's the idea. The idea is national identity and national cohesiveness should be replaced by group identity. And those groups are ethnic groups, religious groups, and others. And all cultures and all religions, etc., are equal. So what national states used to do, which was the cultivation of a dominant cultural identity that everyone is loyal to, that was abandoned for multiculturalism, for this group identity. So that's one. Then two, an outcome of that is what we call in America DEI, but it is the employment or the employment of into government agencies should be a reflection of all those different groups. And then number three, in Holland and in other European countries, the prevailing Islamist movement is the Muslim Brotherhood. And what they have understood based on those two things is that they can enter the system, and they've developed what they call conquest or Islamization through participation. So you take part in the political process, you apply for jobs, you vote, you are around the table where the decisions are made, and your objective is to Islamize. Now, if you bear these three things in mind, and then come to the situation in Amsterdam, what I know, and I don't know if you know this, but what I know is that the Israeli government warned the Dutch government about what was to happen. This is normal. You have intelligence agencies of one country telling the other intelligence agency of the other country that there is a plot to attack the fans, the Israeli fans. So normally the Dutch government would have the necessary security in place. But if what we are seeing now is within the security agencies, they have employees hired through this PI mechanism that are not loyal to the nation state of the Netherlands. And here they have in the Jewish community, Jewish fans, people they dislike, and they're going to ask to vote. And that's why I think the problem is not going to go away. So if you're the Dutch government and you make a promise to say we're going to get the bad apples within the intelligence agencies, the bad thugs who have attacked and caused the pogrom, and next time you come, life is going to be great. No, it's not going to happen. That we need a paradigm shift away from multiculturalism to something else.
I agree with so much of what you're saying, but there is a part of me that does really rebel at calling this a pogrom. I got into a lot of trouble over Shabbat this weekend for saying this, but you know, there is a thing of soccer hooliganism. There is video of the Israeli fans behaving very poorly. Israeli soccer fans are probably the only racist Jews on the planet, and they made that very clear. I guess the part of me that rebels at calling this a pogrom is that aren't we in danger of diluting the power of the word, the power of the concept? There are instances across the globe of totally blameless, innocent, defenseless Jews being attacked, and I guess my question would be, shouldn't we be circumspect when there is blame to share? I mean, obviously I agree with you that the people attacking these Israelis are anti-Semites. I agree with you that the state participation in this or its refusal to take it seriously is despicable and anti-Semitic. But at the same time, you know, does this really deserve the weight of the word pogrom? And should we not have a fear of calling it that?
Well, I think what you're saying is, I agree with you that there is, you know, football fan behavior, and a lot of football fans sometimes really behave in very odious ways, and not just what they call, but also a lot of the vandalism that occurs. For instance, English football fans are disliked in the Netherlands. They cause a lot of problems everywhere. But here's the difference. Mm-hmm. When English fans go to Holland, there is no premeditated attack that comes from within the security agencies that plots to attack them and attempt to kill them for who they are. And I think it's very important to make note of both phenomena. It's also part of the way the Islamist-driven anti-Semitism operates is with every incident when they commit heinous acts against Jews, they somehow know to flip it so that they're the victims, and or that the issue itself becomes flippant, like it's just football hooligans at work, and you know the Maccabees fans were they were shouting anti-Arab slogans. There's nothing to see here. Unfortunately, it's just not true. There is too much to see here. And this incident would be in vain if once again we pretend there is nothing to see here and close our eyes and move on. And I think we have deeper, more structural problems that are not going to be limited to Amsterdam and the Netherlands. I have seen again there are incidents already happening in Belgium. There is an incident in the UK where in the UK, you'll be thrown in jail if you talk about cases that are pending, but there is a news bulletin that a police officer is arrested for being part of sort of a Hamas or terrorist sympathizer. So I think what you're seeing, I really I urge you not to fall for this is just another hooliganism, you know, it's just another incident. It's not. It's much more than that.
Ayaan, let's sort of move the camera out a little bit and look at the situation in the Netherlands, I mean, we can say to Belgium too, and to the UK, and where I used to live in Sweden. I mean, you see the election results in your former home country of the Netherlands, and you see Geert Wilders and the Freedom Party being the top party. This is a man who no one would touch in the Dutch media maybe 10, 15 years ago. So you would see him quite frequently in America, where his message resonated a little more. Now, the biggest party in the Netherlands. The same thing is obviously true of Sweden. The Sweden Democrats became like the second biggest party when I was there. They had a 1%, 2% of the vote. You've been kind of sounding the alarm in this for many years. Where are we when it comes to immigration and the public's perception of this in Europe after the 2015 migrant crisis, where a lot of people, went to the ballot box and said, hold on, this is an integration issue. This is, two separate people living apart. I mean, how is that perceived in the Netherlands now and across Europe from, say, when you left Europe? It seems to have changed a lot, hasn't it?
It has. It was always these two camps. One camp that insisted on national identity prevailing of everything else, and then the others who insisted on multiculturalism. And I think when the numbers were small before 2015, the multiculturalists were on top. Policies and the whole country was moving in that direction. It was the elegant thing to do. It was the cool thing to do. But then over time, as the numbers grew and more irregularities, there's a lot of crime, school dropouts, there's a lot of dependence on the welfare state, a lot of these immigrants are overrepresented, what they said, in the wrong statistics. And then along all of these things was the terrorism, the Islamist-driven terrorism issue. You're now seeing it, Islamist-driven anti-Semitism. We haven't even touched on the way women feel in the public space. So all of that is an effect, a negative effect of the large numbers of immigrants, mainly from Muslim majority countries. So people are moving away, the electorate is moving away from multiculturalism towards an emphasis on national identity. And these parties that emphasize national identity, they are the ones that were labeled far right. They're the ones that were labeled racist and xenophobic. And I think this is the real struggle that you see in Europe. And I think that the people who are abandoning multiculturalism, they are on the right track. But even if today everyone woke up and said, fine, let's drop multiculturalism, then it really is going to be an incredibly difficult assignment to reimagine the way we've organized our societies all across Europe. Because you've told these people that they're welcome, you've said that they can have their mosques and their madrasas and so on, that they can join and participate within the system on their own terms. And now you're going to turn around and say, sorry, you're all fired. We're going to close your mosques, we're going to close your schools. And it's these things that need to happen. It's not just closing the border. It is embarking on a national campaign to assimilate all of those immigrants and their children and their grandchildren to become loyal to the national identity of the country that they live in.
I can't help but think about the comparison with the United States. We really don't have these same problems. I live in a neighborhood that's half Muslim immigrants. It's very routine to walk into a cafe and you'll see, two families sitting side by side. And in one family, the mother wears the hijab and the daughter doesn't. And in the other family, the daughter wears the hijab and the mother doesn't. We love that our Muslim part of what this country was built on. And we just don't have that same feeling of being under threat from whole communities trying to institute some version of Sharia law in their neighborhoods. Our Muslim neighbors don't want that. And the other Muslim community that I'm very familiar with in Israel and in the West Bank also seems to me very resistant to that. If you go to Ramallah now, you'll see women in bars. If you go to Hebron, the universities are full of women students. So I guess my question is, to what extent is this really just a Europe problem? To what extent is this a failure of moral authority and a failure to implement just basic rule of law, like you can't kick women out of a cafe, rather than a problem with Islam per se as a religion.
Well, I disagree with you that we don't have this problem in America. We have it. It's just manifests itself in America in a different way. Number one, this recent election of last week, I think it's also a rejection of, we don't use multiculturalism in America, but part of it was also a rejection of the mind virus of wokeism. It's a rejection of DEI. It's a rejection of downplaying, or what do you call it, suppressing national identity and having these group identities take over, number one. Number two, where you have large numbers of Muslims with a predominance of the Muslim Brotherhood in America, we have the exact same problems. If you go to Michigan, if you go to this place called Hamtramck, I think it was 10 years ago or so, excuse me, when this Islamization by participating through the system made Hamtramck in Michigan the first Muslim city council that is predominantly Muslim, and talk to the locals there who are not Muslim and how their lives have changed and how they were forced either to comply or to move. We've also seen what happened in this spring in 2024 after the October 7 attacks, but also on our national campuses. All of these pro-Hamas, in my view, types that were coming out and shouting the most intolerant, most toxic slogans. So I don't think we can say we don't have this problem in America. In 2006, when I first landed in America, I was told by my colleagues at the American Enterprise Institute that this is all a European problem. And now I think I can look them in the face and say, no, it wasn't a European problem. It's an Islamic problem. It's a Muslim problem. And it's not Muslims in general. Most Muslims are peaceful people. Mm-hmm. It's Islamists who seek to dominate and to Islamize, and then to, after a certain threshold in terms of demographics is reached, who try to impose their will on others. Again, I want to emphasize it's not a majority of Muslims. It's not even about Muslims. It's about this ideology of Islamism, and where it takes hold, we see these irregularities. And it's in America, it's in Australia, it's in Canada, it's all over Europe. The Muslim Brotherhood is banned in Muslim majority countries. It's banned in Saudi Arabia, it's banned in Egypt, it's banned in the UAE. And I think we're going to have to start, we'll have to start having those difficult conversations about what to do with a fifth column amongst ourselves.
I just, that kind of language, I think the reason that it makes me uncomfortable is because I don't think there's a big difference between a neighborhood that's a majority, let's say Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Jewish, and a neighborhood that's a majority Muslim. People have a free speech right. They don't have a right to impose it on others, but they do have a right to exercise their religion as they see fit. And, you know, when you look at a place like Rockland County, you see the local white population, you know, American population, also resisting American Jews who sort of want to move in and build their shuls and their synagogues and have their kids go to their schools. But we would never consider that to be somehow, I hope, would never consider that to be a threat to American society. And so I feel, how can I not extend that same courtesy, the free speech that makes this country what it is, to my Muslim neighbors?
I think that we are talking about two different things. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about a subversive force that wants to bring down the structures, that doesn't accept the prevailing national idea, philosophy, constitution, Bill of Rights, and institutions as I'm just going to have my religion and live next to other groups peacefully. There are many Muslims who are like that and who live that way in America and in Europe and who are totally harmless. I'm not talking about them. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the subversive Islamist efforts to bring about a revolution and to Islamize, and then the methods that they use, which are nothing compared to Hasidic communities, regardless of how orthodox those Hasidic communities are.
I know we're
complicated concepts, but I know we've got to simplify them.
Yeah. Well, I know we're up against time here, so I'm going to ask you one more question. And, when you talk about, Islamism within Europe, and, this story is obviously out of the Netherlands, so we're focusing on Europe. Back in the days of Islamic State, the number of people coming from certain neighborhoods in Belgium, certain places in Malmö in Sweden, was pretty terrifying. The numbers of people, whole units in Raqqa that were from Denmark. I mean, this was a very strange thing to see. But we are so far down that road, Ayaan. I mean, you've been warning about this, and a number of other people have. How do you fix it at this point? Is there anything one can do? Because as you say about multiculturalism, the presumption there is that there's a kind of separate culture, right? You retain your culture, and there is not integration. There is not an emphasis on integration, which hasn't happened in so many places. It's not across the board, but it hasn't happened in so many places. At this point, I mean, what does one do when you have a population in a country, and let's take Sweden and the Netherlands, in which recent immigrants are highly represented in crime statistics, highly dependent on welfare, and living in a society apart? I mean, when that has happened, and previous governments have, in my opinion, made that error of just allowing people to come in and no integration whatsoever, you're in this very, very particular situation where you have to do something, and there's not a lot of options, right?
Well, I think you should not wait until circumstances decide for you. In other words, until things fall into chaos, which we've seen happen in some countries. For instance, in the former Yugoslavia, tensions between ethnic groups and religious groups built up and then exploded. And we don't want things like that happening in Europe. And when I talk about a paradigm shift, I think one of the things that Europe could do is, number one, relegate this to the top political priority. It's a very, very difficult topic. It's also complex, but there are small steps, straightforward steps. It's not a small step, but it's a straightforward step, is to close the borders. It's to hold, what they can do in Europe is hold these referenda, national identity versus multiculturalism. The populations know exactly what we are talking about. If there's a majority for national identity, an emphasis on national identity, and there is such a majority, as you've seen in the American election, where minorities also reject these group identities and identity politics. I think it's the case in Europe that today you will find, even among ethnic minorities, a rejection of identity politics, perhaps sometimes more passionately than the local. And then embark on this campaign of then cultivating this national loyalty. Who are we? The language, the institutions, and getting rid of these fifth column, exposing it and getting rid of it and proscribing it. And to do this, to proscribe the Islamist organizations, to close down these mosques and etc., we can work together or learn from other countries that have done similar things. Singapore has got a large Muslim population that's perfectly well assimilated and who still have their Muslim identity and don't feel in any way, shape, or form threatened. But the arrangement between the Muslim community and the Singaporean government is that they are not a fifth column, that they form no threats to the integrity of the country. And it's the same with these Arab countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, that have banned the Muslim Brotherhood. They did it for a reason. And I think it's very important, especially now, to work together with them and ask them, how did you go about it and what can we do? And then we decide, as Europeans and Americans, we decide, how to go about it within the framework and while still respecting freedom of speech, of association, of religion, of charities, all of that.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, I have about 7,000 more questions, but you have to go, I have to go. And so maybe I'll just text you or something and we can just talk about it offline because this could go on forever. Ayaan, thank you so much for joining us.
So much.
She has a podcast. Follow her stuff. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, thank you for joining us on The Free Press.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.